Our purpose statement says that we create experiences that move people, and what does that mean? Primarily, that means that we take design thinking and we solve problems creatively. And so if you're thinking, what does that mean to me? We put a little bit of design, some architecture, creative thinking, put that in a blender with storytelling, branding, mix it all in, and primarily use that throughout facilities to help connect with audiences. And so what I'm here for today is to kind of give you guys insight to the main audience that you serve, and that's the current students or prospective students, Gen Z, that you're dealing with. So you're going to hear me refer to this generation, Generation Z, Zen G, iGen. You're also going to you'll hear the word plurals used for this generation, and that really comes from a social scientist named Morley Winograd, who said that this group is really called the pluralist because they are going to be the first generation that when they're mature is going to be, the majority of them will be made up by minorities. So think about that. When this generation is mature, it's going to be the first generation that the majority of them will be minorities. Okay? So then the futures group, formerly known as Yankelovich, refers to this generation as Centennials. All right? So I'd like to do just a quick exercise here, really quick. If you're in one of the generations that I call out, raise your hand. So silent generation, born 1928 to 45. Do we have anyone from the silent generation in the audience? Okay. So baby boomers, born 46 to 64, baby boomers. All right, good. Then we have Gen X, 65 to 80. Then we have millennials, 81 to 96. Any millennials? A few. And then centennials, who we're talking about, 97 to present. Any centennials in the room? All right, this is good then, because we're all going to learn something about a generation that's not represented here. So let's do a few quick hits on this generation. So I'm going to give you a few quick hits. So the oldest Gen Zer will turn 22 this year. They represent 23% of the population as it stands today. And this is important. This is an important factor. Their parents are Gen Xers and millennials. And I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit. And then also in 2020, actually a year from now, they're going to represent 40% of the world's consumers. And that's mind-blowing. So think about this generation. They were born in 97, and they have never not known technology. So they were pretty much born with some sort of device in their hand. And because of that, they are 25% more likely to admit to being addicted to technology than millennials are. And a full 40% of this generation self-admittedly says they are addicted to technology. So I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old at home. My wife and I probably can write a book on bad parenting tips, but probably the first one on my list would be the day we bought a PlayStation 4. That has caused us more fights, more arguments, more, what little hair I have left on my head to be pulled out. And I really have this vision of taking that PlayStation 4 out into the field, much like on Office Space, with the printer and obliterating it. So if you're like me and have that same issue at home, we'll be starting a support group, and you can meet me in the back after this to get signed up. So they also have no issue getting information, okay? Google will self-populate a search, but what they can't do is they can't justify if that information is correct or not. So if they wanted to raise their IQ, Google could tell them you could do that by eating gifted children. They're not sure what to do with that information, but it's there for the taking. So because of all of this, right, they're very good at communicating digitally, but they're not very good at communicating face-to-face. And some of you may have interviewed these folks for internships or jobs on campus. I know I have, and I'll be emailing back and forth with them, and I'll be like, man, this candidate is it. I have found the intern. I don't need to talk to anyone else. And then I get them face-to-face, and it's like they're about to be smacked by a Mack truck. They don't know how to communicate face-to-face. They also do the digital communication in isolation. So they don't know how to read emotional cues, and they're not very good natural-born leaders. So remember that. I hate to break this to you, but in their head, they're the star of the show. They've always had a camera on them, as I mentioned earlier, so they're the star of their own documentary. The only thing they know of themselves growing up is having a photo to document every occasion that they've been a part of. Now, you and I view this as a phone. I can call you, you can call me, we'll talk about things. But it's much more to this generation. The Centennials see this as a magical portal. And through this magical portal, they can get entertainment, they can get food brought to them, they can get a ride to wherever they want to go. But most importantly, they see this as kind of selfie mode, and they're able to get their validation through social media, through this device. They're also, again, remember, they want to do a lot of things, so they can do a lot of multitasking with the phone, but they're not good at any of it. Research has shown that they cannot focus on one thing, so they do a lot of things okay, but nothing really well. They also have grown up in a time where change is constant, and they expect that. So on your college campus, if you aren't growing, renovating, doing things to stay current, in their mind, you're being outpaced. You're being left in the dust by those folks that are. Let's talk about social media for a little bit. I don't know how many of you follow social media, but Wendy's is a great example of how they interact with their consumers. And remember, 40% of this generation will be world consumers in just a year. So let's take a look at some examples. So someone tweets out, man, when you're hungry and Wendy's comes through in the clutch with the 4 for $4, Wendy's just responds, here for you. Now remember, this device, self-validation. So the tweet back is, man, I feel so special when you guys reply. So they want to be connected to the brands that they hold dear and they trust. So here's some other examples of Wendy's doing a little bit of tongue-in-cheek. Someone calls them out, saying that the beef that they use in their hamburgers is not fresh, calling it a joke. And they simply say, you're sorry to hear that, but we've been using that fresh meat since 1969. So you deliver it raw, hot on the truck? And they simply respond back with a question that says, what do you store cold things in that aren't frozen? And then they make a mistake. They bring in a competitor, right? So they bring in McDonald's, and this is when Wendy's actually roast this Twitter user. It's like, hey, don't bring in somebody else when you forgot that refrigerators existed for a second. So while turning that back on the user, they're also creating that brand two-way communication that I talked about. That user is validated by that. He cared enough about Wendy's to tweet at them. They cared enough about him to respond. That's critical in this market. So remember the 40% of the world's consumers? Well, also 50% of this generation, want to spend less time on this device. So Apple, being the consumer insight geniuses that they are, say, oh, no problem. We hear what the market is saying. You guys need an app, screen time. I'm going to be able to let you personally limit how much you're on this device down to the app that you want to control. Again, Apple's hearing what this consumer base has to say, and they're adapting to it. So if you're like me, you kind of group millennials and centennials together, right? They're both younger. They both somewhat act the same, or so you think, but they really do have a lot of differences. So I'd like to kind of compare and contrast these really quickly. Millennials grew up in a time of affluence, so they never saw their parents struggle. Centennials, however, grew up seeing their parents struggle through two major events, and that's the fallout from 9/11 and then the recession in 2008. Because of that, Centennials really are like old souls. They expect to have to work hard. They don't want anything given to them, but they're really keyed in on being financially successful. That's key for them. Gary Vee, who many of you may have heard, say that they're self-starters and that they will use this device as their quote-unquote side hustle. So they can drive for Uber and Lyft, they can take food for Uber Eats, they can sell things on Etsy and eBay, but they're quick starters. They're very entrepreneurial in their mindset. Because of all of this, living in their parents' basement is not an option for them. And they carry a lot of anxiety around because, be very clear when I say this, they would rather have the guarantee of not being poor than the promise of being rich. Let me say that again. This generation would rather have the guarantee of not being poor than the promise of being rich. Unlike millennials, where millennials want to be discovered, centennials are more practical. They expect to have to work hard, and because they're working hard, again, they want that financial success after college. Millennials want to be a big part of a team. Centennials want to be individuals. Fortnite, raise your hand if you've ever played or know someone who plays Fortnite. My kids do. That's probably what most of the fights are about. But you're very individual in that game with your character that you pick and the options that that character can have. They're playing right to what centennials want, to be able to express themselves individually. Millennials like to overshare on social media. That's why you may have seen some of your younger coworkers posting their drunk karaoke videos on Facebook or Instagram. Centennials are very selective about what they post. They're curators of their story. And so if we look at this over time, centennials are going to post about the experiences that they have, and then folks like us who are friends with them or follow them like it, share it, retweet it, whatever that may be, and that builds their social wealth. And their social wealth is like their drug. The more likes and tweets and replies that they get, the more they're going to post those experiences. And that's important for you guys, because if they're on your college campus and they're posting things from campus, that's a good signal for you, because that's the story that they want to tell about themselves, even though in reality it's a highlight reel of their lives. The perception is, this is what these folks are doing, this is what they must really like. It's the story that they want to tell. So 77% of centennials say price is secondary compared to the experience that they receive. So they're willing to pay for the $4 Starbucks coffee when they could go down to the corner gas station and get relatively the same type of coffee for 99 cents. So again, they want a brand that that represents them be a part of the story. And let's just face it, you guys are just another brand on the Centennial landscape. So that kind of concludes our secondary research that we have done. As I mentioned earlier, we kind of create experiences that move people. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to stay relevant, and you have to know what enables this generation's buying decisions. So this is the 6th year in a row that we've released the College Choice Study. And so if you go to collegechoicestudy.com, you're going to see 2 twin studies, one for the general student population and one for prospective student athletes. And so what we found there, well, we did this through partnering with Samford University in Birmingham, Dr. Darren White there, who's the chair of their sports analytics there in the Brock School of Business. What we found from this study is that the student athlete and the general student responses really have a lot of overlap. One of the key drivers there, again, are the majors. 8 of the 9 top majors result in some sort of vocation. It goes back to them wanting to be financially successful when they get out of college. So the look and feel is very important to centennials, so much so that the general student survey told us some great information. The perception of the quality of the building drives the perception of the quality of what goes on in that building. So simply put, the better the building, the better the education. So let me wrap this up for you guys with 5 key takeaways. The first one, be intentional about your campus visits. We heard last night from Dr. Cobain about how when a prospective student pulls up, what is the first impression? Because you guys are not only competing against the folks in this room for those same students, you're also competing with what it's like for those same prospective students to walk into Disney World or to Universal Studios or places that are fully immersion experiences. Student centers need to be a part of your tour, and I know most of you guys do a great job of this already, but prospective students want to see what their quote-unquote living room will be when they go on a campus visit. The third thing goes back to the majors. Make sure that the buildings associated with the top majors are part of the tour, especially your primary business building. They want to make sure that you're setting them up for success financially when they're done with their 4 years with you. Design for memorability. Again, if you see someone pulling out their magical portal and taking a selfie or taking a photo in front of something on campus, that's a buying signal, right? They're wanting to share that experience with their community. But don't leave it at just them posting that. Make sure that someone from your campus is interacting with the post so that they feel special and they know that you care, that they're a part, that they were on your campus. And then lastly, have a virtual tour mindset. And what I mean by that is make sure your facilities are so good that the folks in your admissions and your marketing want to feature them on a virtual tour that a Centennial can try before they buy on the magical portal. If they can see what you have before they step foot on campus, that's a huge benefit for you guys. So my colleagues, Walt and Heath, are going to pass out a little handout over that will give you some more information on the study that we conducted with Dr. White. I think I have a few minutes left. Does anyone have any questions?
Does your research talk about how long Gen Z is going to last? I've heard a lot of conversation about that this might be the shortest generation that we've ever seen. Is there research showing that?
You know what? Our research is not really on the length of the generation, more so is what choices that enable them to make decisions are. But we can definitely connect you with Dr. White, who can give you more information on that part of it. Any other questions? All right, great. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.